Right. I can't tell if I have arrived. I have arrived. I had to do a system reboot. Zoom was not letting me. So we streamed through Zoom for these. I'm going to change my background too. And I've got an upper respiratory infection, so all the things are going on for me today. But I'm super excited to be here because today's topic is, I think, one of the most um important things. One of them, I think they're all really important. You know that, but I think this one is especially important for you if you are experiencing some self-doubt, maybe about your abilities to take on a bigger role or to land in a new company in a new job, or if you've suddenly been offered the opportunity to interact and be more visible with the executive team, and then you hear kind of that self-doubt voice. Am I ready? Is this for me? The imposter syndrome conversation of, they're going to find me out. They're going to, at some point, they're going to realize that I don't have the goods. And so this isn't really an imposter syndrome talk, but this is what I call your career through line. So I currently have a client who is, she's led many large scale infrastructure projects and a few large scale customer facing app projects. She she really enjoys the customer facing applications far more than the infrastructure applications. And so as she's repositioning her or, beginning her job search and looking out into what's available to her, she wants to focus on customer facing applications. The deal is that, well, I think so. There's that. And then there's another client of mine who she was just recently promoted to a more senior director role, and that expanded her scope across time zones. Her team's over 100 people now. And so she wants to bring the success that got her there into the role. But she's, got a little bit of that. Okay, how am I going to do that? How do I do that? Because, of course, she wants to make her boss look good. She wants to prove that this was the right move for the organization to promote her. And so I think one of the biggest challenges to changing industries, for example, or to stepping into a bigger role, or, suddenly finding yourself in having regular conversations with the C-suite, it isn't the work itself, but it's you showing why you belong there. So to the recruiters, to the leaders, to the new customers you may be interfacing with, to your new team, and even, of course, to yourself, right? So most women I work with do not lack really solid experience, you know, bragging rights for sure. But they lack a framework for telling their story in a way that makes sense to people, that highlights their strengths without holding back, or kind of, gives them the courage. If you have what I call your career through line framework, if you have this sort of framework, then you just sort of like, it's like no nonsense, right? This is the facts. This is why, I'm the person for this job. So instead of looking at their experience and thinking things are not, the role that I was in doesn't fully line up with this new role, or what I'm doing now doesn't fully line up with those job descriptions I'm looking at, or I've done a lot, but it's kind of all over the place. Even I can't make sense of it. You need to make sense of it. You don't know necessarily how to connect those dots, right? And so sorry about my cold. This is where the idea of the career through line, when I was talking to these two women, I was like, we need this thing that pulls the common thread that connects, what you've done, acknowledges why you've gotten that new role, right? A career through line is really a consistent, it's the consistent value that you've created throughout your career. That's what builds your through line. So it doesn't matter what industry, it doesn't matter what titles you've had, it doesn't even matter, all of the functions, or the scope of your work or the companies you've worked for. It's less about any of that, and it's more about how you frame it, or reframe what you've done. So looking at your career patterns and then creating stories out of those or for those. Um, let's see. So when someone understands, so when I think about storytelling, storytelling paints pictures in people's minds. That's why storytelling is so powerful. And so if you can tell a story with your career through line, connecting these dots for them, then they're going to understand your career through line. And when that happens, they're going to stop asking, have you done this exact job? But instead, they're going to know that you are a person that can operate in the environment that they have because of how you've helped create the thread of your career, connecting those dots backwards, bringing it forwards, of your career, and then telling that in a way in which makes sense to them, makes sense to you, like you believe it, and that power comes across as you're telling it. And linear stories are often, not always, but often a trap, where a through line can move a little bit, like a clothesline in the wind. It's moving over here where it makes sense and moving back over here. And a linear story can be a trap, especially for women, because most hiring and promotion systems that we have in place now in corporate America reward the linear narrative. That you've been in the same industry, or that you have a natural progression from this role, naturally into this role, naturally into this role, kind of along the same straight linear line. It's a very neat progression. You've had predictable titles, right? But most career paths, and again, especially for women, do not follow the linear narrative. Women rarely work linearly. They move sort of from execution to influence. They might move from one domain to another. They might be working behind the scenes and then step into visible leadership. They might be working, then they might be at home, and then they might be working again. So it's not necessarily making logical sense sometimes, the path. But we don't care about logic. What we care about is you positioning yourself powerfully in a way that shows why you're the best fit for the role, why their confidence in you is well placed, and removing any sort of energy of your own self-doubt that might come across when you're presenting to the C-suite or having conversations with the CEO, even casually in a casual event. You need to carry this self-belief with you. So we want to talk about our careers powerfully and unapologetically. And when you can't name your career through line, what happens is, like, clearly get a sense of it, what happens. And I'm going to do some reframes for you, and then I'm going to give you an easy way to just a couple sentences, fill in the blank sentences that you can use that are very sufficient in explaining a career through line. Of course, one sentence isn't necessarily going to be the whole story. That's funny. Even in my illness, I came with something funny. So yes, one sentence could be the whole story, but most of the time we need some paragraphs. And that's just digging a little deeper in what I'm going to talk to you about today. So, like I was saying, if you're not telling the story of your career through line and how things connect and make sense, and the skills, abilities, and gifts that you brought in order to succeed in these different places at these different times, even if they might be like over here for 3 years, and then I went over here, and that doesn't seem to make sense, but let me help you see why it does. That's you creating a career through line story for the people to be able to visualize in their head and kind of get behind, right? Because if you don't do that, the people on the other end are just filling in gaps and almost always incorrectly about your career and your abilities, right? So let me talk about 4 ways to reframe and optimize your career through line. So reframe number 1 is, and these are just kind of thoughts that are fairly common that I see women and men having in their um, in their careers. So the first one is that you want to reframe and look for the job under the job. So you want to move from I don't have the right background to I understand the system this role operates in. You see that reframe? So, I often hear I've never worked in that industry, so I must not be qualified. But the reframe asks a better question. Like, what is this? And you can be asking these questions, and then you're going to have these really good responses because you've been thinking about your through line. So you can sort of tee it up and you can saying, so what is required of this role at the core, right? And then in that reframe from you don't have the right background to you understand the system it's operating in, you can strip away some of the jargon and look for fundamentals like decision making and ambiguity, for example, or navigating complex stakeholders, or even complex cultures, right? Translating between technical and business teams, managing risk at scale or through change. So you're trying to just get underneath some of that jargon and be like, oh, what you're really saying is this, and you can frame your questions, so tell me a little bit about, you know, um, what, tell me, you can ask them about the stakeholder relationships and how decisions are made and things like that. And when you're asking about where things aren't working, you can start to put your through line into those. Okay, that's reframe number 1. Reframe number 2, well, with reframe number 1, uh, you know, we're going below the surface, right? We're getting rid of all this kind of jargony stuff on the top. We're getting underneath, and then we're bringing in examples, real examples of how what they're trying to do requires these particular leadership skills, for example, and you've shown that you have those exact same leadership skills, maybe in a different industry, maybe with a smaller scope, maybe in a larger scope, doesn't matter. You have them. Second reframe is we like to think about your role as the role as kind of the map to how you get there, but the work you're doing is in a territory. So it's from this is not officially my job to this is where I create real impact. So job descriptions, we all know, are they're aspirational. That's a good word, right? Job descriptions are aspirational, and org charts are political. Titles are inconsistent. Even within organizations, someone's title over here could be doing a completely different thing with the exact same title over here, right? So work really happens in those gaps, and many women undersell themselves because they focus on their role as the map instead of finding the gaps. And then because they're focused on the role itself, sort of what is this role doing, that's where they're finding their own gaps, like that I'm not senior enough, or I don't officially own that. You might hear someone say, which I think is really interesting because you're doing the work and you don't officially own it. And then you've just diminished yourself, right? Or it's not, that has not been part of my job description. Again, sort of like the non-ownership thing. We need to look at your career as a territory through a different lens by asking, where did you influence decisions? How did you connect teams? Where did you see around corners? How did you prevent problems from escalating? These are all kind of in a larger landscape than what's on, the role description that you have. So your career through line is built from the work you did in your territory, not necessarily boxed by a title or role. And you need to show that. I hope that one makes sense because, I think the thing to remember is you're going to have all these bullet points on a job description or something in a specific title, and you're looking at that laundry list of things, or even the new role, or this big project that's launching, and you've never done something greenfield, or you've never been leading a global project, and then you could start to second guess yourself. And we want to go and say, don't look specific, so specific and linear again, but think about it as a territory. And you're going to, just like they're going to need to influence decisions, you have experience influencing decisions, even outside of your ownership, right? And so that's the reframe there. The third reframe I want to talk about is the big picture career thinking. And again, this is one I hear quite a bit. You want to reframe from can I handle this to here's how I operate at that level. So limited career thinking sounds like I'm in a new role, the scope is much bigger, I suddenly have more visibility. These are just thoughts. You might not be saying it out loud, but they're scaring you a little bit, right? And big picture career thinking reframes that to what patterns. So I love this. We've looked at a map and a territory, right? And now we're looking at, and we've also looked at the in the reframe. What was reframe number one? See, how I forget all these things. It doesn't matter. Reframe number one. Oh, the job under the job. And now we're looking at this idea of big picture career thinking. So you're looking at patterns and what patterns from your past prepared you for this level of scope. What decisions or systems are you now responsible for that are similar to what you've been responsible for before? How do you want leaders? You want to be thinking, how do I want the leaders to understand the value I'm bringing to this altitude, to this particular project? So this reframe, I think, is especially important for women who have been described as trusted or reliable or the fixers, right? I think women excel at spotting problems and solving them, anticipating problems and solving them ahead of time. And we don't want to lose that skill, super valuable. But when we're considered trusted, reliable, and the fixer without a career through line, like a clear career through line, this expanded scope often turns into invisible labor, or you get this reputation of, oh, give it to her. She can handle anything, which we know usually means you can handle everything. We'll just give her everything. So I just love that, limited thinking to big career thinking. And then finally, reframe number 4 is what I call inversion thinking. So why this actually makes you fit. So you go from you need to prove yourself to the role needs what I have to offer. I don't have to prove myself. That we're inverting that. This role needs me. And here's why, right? So instead of asking how am I qualified, you ask what would someone clearly unqualified. So this is interesting. We're not trying to figure out, again, the because of the inversion part. We're not necessarily, we absolutely are aware of the strengths that we're bringing to the role, but we're also asking the question, what would someone who's completely, truly unqualified for this role struggle with? And when you do that, you get your brain working on that problem, then you can start to see how you're not as unqualified as you thought you are. For example, someone completely unqualified in this role would miss system level risks, would fail to align the stakeholders, would struggle to translate the across the functions, would optimize locally instead of globally, right? So when you run this exercise, you realize that literally this is what you're good at. The things that a true underqualified person would struggle with, they are not a struggle for you. And that's not imposter syndrome. That's unclaimed pattern recognition. So we are trying to find the patterns here. So how do you find? So those are our 4 reframes. And again, you can read my blog, go out to my website under resources, look for career blog, sign up for it. You'll get it every week on LinkedIn. Hello, YouTubers. Hello, LinkedIn. Hello, Meta. Um, you can, on LinkedIn, you can find it in my featured section, the most recent blogs. So, in case those reframes went by fast. I do talk fast, we know that. And I have a lot to cover in this one today. So I promised I would give you the 4 reframes, and now I want to give you sort of a simple way. It's more complex than this. That's where join Career Alchemy Academy and we can work on this more deeply. But I wanted to give you something simple that you can do to claim your career through line. So I want you to just think about the last 3 to 5, depending, like your last real meaty, if it's 3 meaty roles, and ignoring the titles, ignoring the roles that you were in, and just ask yourself, what problems was I consistently pulled into? So trying again to find the patterns across these roles. Where did people rely on my judgment at different places inside of these roles? And what kind of mess did I know how to clean up inside of these roles? And there's more questions, but it's a good place to start. And now in one sentence, I challenge you to say, across those roles, I'm the person who, fill in the blank, or another way that I love saying, just a reframe of the sentence is based on all this stuff that you've, in response to these questions, I am someone who is known for fill in the blank. Known for solving big problems and, um, you know, again, minimizing system risks and those things that we were talking about, things like that. That's what you're known for. So the career through line reframes become the backbone for, and those sentences become the backbone for your interviews, for your executive conversations, for your career pivots, for confidence in bigger rooms. And remember that career growth isn't about reinventing yourself. It's about recognizing the patterns in your career and then learning how to articulate and connect them clearly to your audience so the picture is getting painted in their mind, and then they see past, this bullet point matching this bullet point, or this project, matching that project scope. They get past all of that to the real value you're bringing. So when you can name your career through line, you've drawn a picture that others can clearly see and a line around, then you are standing in the center of your territory in full career power. And how great does that feel? So that's today. And at this point, I think we're here at our normal time next week. I was planning to go to an event this afternoon, but because of my sickness, I decided I wouldn't expose people to this upper respiratory that I have. So I stayed home. So I could have done 1 o'clock, but we'd already published it for 2. But next week, I believe we're at our normal time of 1 o'clock Central Time. Look for the blog, join Career Alchemy Academy, follow the QR code over my shoulder. We welcome you, alchemist that you are, meeting you where you're at. If you're on a job search, if you don't know exactly what you want to do next, and maybe you want to get a new job, maybe you don't, doesn't matter to us. We will figure it out with you and we'll help you to get more clear and bring in all these parts of juicy successes that you've had and create that career through line with you together in the community. Peace. Talk to you all soon.